Chris, I wanted to ask you about Friday. We talked, and you mentioned that defense was probably your primary concern coming out of there. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm.
How reasonable is it to think that you can get that fixed between then and tomorrow night? And is that even the aim?
It's reasonable. Having said that, Baylor presents a lot different challenge than Arizona State. We have to be better defensively, and there's no getting around that.
Is the adage that you learn more about your team after a loss than you do after a win. Now, that's not the preferred method, obviously, but you take a loss like that, is that true? Do you take more from it that you can use to build on and improve?
Well, I think it exposes, your weaknesses, maybe where you're vulnerable at that stage of the year. I think it gives reality to the players. We have to get better because of it. I think it'd be foolish, whether it's me as the coach, our team, individual players, to not respond accordingly and fix what we saw as a major problem against Arizona State. I think it certainly gives reality. If it doesn't, then you weren't part of the game on Friday.
You've never shied away from challenging your team in the non-conference. Is that kind of what this is all about? I mean, this is where you're preparing your team for further down the road.
I mean, we have to play the best teams that we can, teams that will agree to play us home and home, because our league is going to be tough as it is. We had 7 teams in the tournament a year ago. I think the league is every bit as good as it was last year, and so if we play a bunch of cupcakes and Division IIs, and then by the time the Big East comes around, there may not be enough time in the season to correct some things. So you learn a lot about your team in the non-conference. I think the selection committee has shown that if you go out and challenge yourself, that you don't get penalized by losing to really, really good teams. And that's sort of been our MO in terms of scheduling over the last several years, well before I was head coach.
You have witnessed, enjoyed whatever this game as a fan, a player, and a coach. You're probably the only person who can say that. Can you try to give us a little perspective on each, how you approached the game as a fan, how you approached it as a player, and how you approach it now as a coach?
You talking about the crosstown?
Yeah.
I'm not talking about that. We have Baylor tomorrow. I mean, I'll talk to you. I'll talk to you. After we play Baylor, Paul. You can call me anytime you want. But it'd be foolish to start talking about an opponent publicly that we don't play until Saturday when we have one of the biggest non-conference games of the year tomorrow night here in the Centos.
Chris, there were some great non-conference games last year. Probably not one of this caliber, just because if only because Baylor's ranked. Do nights like tomorrow night, how does that affect you emotionally? Do you get excited? Do you enjoy it more?
I get excited for every game. I think we recognize how strong of a program Baylor is, and what they did to us last year, and the problems they present on both ends of the floor. So it's a big challenge. I wouldn't have scheduled the game, and we wouldn't have scheduled the game if we didn't think that we could compete to win. Baylor's had our number. Again, I think what Scott Drew's done with the program since he took over is remarkable. Probably doesn't get enough credit nationally for the job he's done, and this year's team is no different. So our guys are well aware of that. We're going to have to be ready to go tomorrow night.
Obviously, Arizona State's guards presented some serious issues. You mentioned different challenges. What makes Baylor's guards maybe different at all from Arizona State?
Well, it's not so much their guards. I mean, obviously, Kant is a terrific guard. He manhandled us a year ago. He had 24 points. He got in the lane. I think he was more of an unknown quantity when we played him a year ago, versus who he is now. But I just meant overall in terms of how Baylor plays. They're a little bit more football team-like. We're going to run a play. We're going to walk the ball up on a made shot, and we're going to use our size to our advantage. We're going to post up. We're going to offensive rebound, and they do it really, really well. So, you know, they're not the high-flying team that Arizona State is. They're not shooting, 33s in a game and, letting their guards just sort of shoot transition pull-ups and, some circus shots. They're a little bit more methodical, but there's a million ways to skin a cat, and they do it really well.
Chris, Karen Cantor seemed to me to be playing on Friday at a much different level than, what he did on Friday was different for me than any of his previous performances in the young season. Are you happy with where he at, and how close do you think he is to contributing significantly on a steady basis?
Yeah, what I saw on Friday out of Karen was what we anticipated in preseason.
Yeah.
He was terrific early on in preseason practices before, anybody in the public saw him play. And then, as I told Karen the other day, he didn't play very well in the first few games. He wasn't a presence on either end. He was weak with the ball. He didn't finish around the rim when he had a size advantage. And he completely flipped that while we were out in Las Vegas. So it gives me a lot of confidence as a coach. And as I told him, I'll play the guys that play the best. And I think that was very evidenced a year ago when an unknown freshman in Tyreek sort of upseated a fifth-year senior in Rashid. Coaches want to win, and we're going to put the best players out there that perform the best in practice, play the best. And I thought his play in Las Vegas certainly reflected more of who we thought Karen was in the preseason.
And it opens up the offense a bit more, doesn't it?
It can. It can. He really knows how to play. He can pass the ball. He's a dual threat, both facing the basket and with his back to the basket. And I think as his teammates gain even more confidence in him, we become that much more difficult to guard. And I thought defensively he did a really good job. He rebounded the ball. He ignited our break. He held his own underneath against some two, high major athletes. So Karen brings a lot to the table, and it was good to see him sort of come out of his shell on Friday.